Hi, I'm Helen Milner from Good Things Foundation, and welcome to Digital Futures for Good. Today, we're going to be diving into the connections between economic inactivity, digital inclusion, and pathways to work. And I'm really thrilled to introduce our guest, the Right Honourable Alan Milburn. Alan is a prominent figure in British politics and public policy. He served as an MP for Darlington from 1992 to 2010 and held several high-profile roles, including the Secretary of State for Health in Tony Blair's government. In recent years, he focused on social mobility and health policy. He chaired the Social Mobility Commission and the Child Poverty Commission, working to tackle inequality and expand opportunities for young people. Alan now continues his work in public policy, including through chairing the Pathways to Work Commission in Barnsley, that we're going to be talking about today. Alan is also the lead non-exec director on the departmental board of the Department for Health and Social Care for the UK government. And he has a long and continuing career looking at some of the deepest challenges of our time and how we can tackle those together. Alan, it's a huge pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the series. Okay. So, Alan,
So
the
go for it.
path.
Cool, go for it.
So, Alan, the path that brought me here was actually your Pathways to Work Commission report. So, ever since I read it in July, I've been a massive fan. So, I don't know if the news has got back to you, but I've been talking about it everywhere. Labour Party conference, any panels I'm on. In fact, I've probably talked about it in Digital Futures for Good already before. I think what excites me about it is because it really epitomizes that joined up thinking. And that joined up thinking really necessary to make like the Labour's missions work. And so that's really exciting and something that's been missing about that holistic view of how to help people with multiple challenges, but also recognizing the economic benefit that that's going to bring to the country as well as to those individuals. So I really want to start by talking a bit about the Pathways to Work Commission and just kicking off, like, why did you do it and what did you think was the most significant finding about the commission?
Well, thank you. You're very generous about the commission and the report. So I got involved in it really because Steve Houghton, who's the leader of Barnsley Council, is a very old friend, and he correctly identified probably a couple of years ago this question of economic inactivity was going to be a big part of the public policy agenda. Because Barnsley, I guess, it's a bit of it's a micro of what's happened in the labour market over the last 30 or 40 years across the UK, in that this was the epicenter of the miners' strike in 1984, epicenter of mass unemployment, which is what I grew up with in the northeast of England in the 80s and 90s. And today it has lower unemployment than the national average. It's absolutely remarkable. And their big problem, employers there, just like employers everywhere, is that they're short of labour. And in fact, the biggest constraint on economic growth now is that we're short of labour, which is a remarkable turnaround for those of us who grew up in the era of mass unemployment. And you've got 2.8 million people or more who are off work sick. So that's quite a big problem. And if you've got constraints on immigration, which you have politically, because it's become a toxic issue, and you've got more or less full employment, Barnsley and elsewhere in the country, the question is where are the workers going to come from? And so we've got to find a way of getting people back to work who have either left the labour market or have not been in it. And I guess what we were trying to do in Barnsley was to really understand that phenomena in detail. So we did a lot of work, a lot of polling, a lot of survey work with people who are economically inactive. We talked to a lot of employers, talked to a lot of public agencies about what was going on. And I guess what we found are some basic facts and truths that hitherto have been hidden. The first is that you've got a group of people who have been effectively written off from the labour market, unfit to work, not actively seeking work, and therefore discounted as future workers. And yet we found when we polled them that 7 in 10 of them actually wanted a job. 8 in 10 of them were receiving a state benefit of one form or another, but only 1 in 10 of them were in any sort of contact with employment services to enable them to do the very thing that they wanted to do, which is work. So this is a perverse system. I mean, perverse in every regard. So there's loads of people who want to work, who could work. Hitherto, until recently, public policy has really been about trying to solve what is effectively a health problem, because most of these people have some sort of health problem, 3 in 4 of them in Barnsley. people who are economically inactive with a health problem. And the public policy answer has been to hit them with benefit sanctions or the threat of that. And so it just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And the stock of the economically inactive is growing, and people are leaving the labour market, particularly young people, which is really worrying. Mental health problems, and becoming economically inactive. So we need a complete change in tack. And what the report really does is analyse that and describe how a solution could work based both upon what could happen locally, but what needs to happen nationally in terms of public policy with a new government.
And at that local level, one of the things I really liked was this system steward role, I think it's called. I think of them as a navigator, helping individuals to navigate around the health, the public health, and the public help that they could get, but also community groups and lots of organisations. I know in Barnsley you found hundreds of them. And so just helping someone in a very holistic way get the help that they need through the system that's already there. Um, do you think that's the biggest thing that has come out from the commission, from the solution? Is that one of the big things?
I think it's one of the things. I think, look, the first thing that you've really got to do is you've got to accept that local labour markets and local places are all different. Okay. So, one of the recommendations in the report, which indeed the new government, the Labour government, is enacting, is to devolve responsibility for employment support away from Job Centre Plus being run as a national organisation to instead being run much more locally. So, the idea is to give mayors control over those employment support services. That's the first thing. Second thing that you've then got to do is you've got to align employment support, career services, and healthcare, because a lot of these problems are health related. And you've got to get these agencies working as one. And at the moment, they're like ships that pass in the night, they just don't connect. Third thing that you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you know what are the cohorts that can most benefit from that support, and you've got to personalize that support to the individual, because every individual has very different family circumstances, health needs, and so on. And so that's a real cultural reinvention of the way that employment support currently works. A lot of employment support is really founded in an organization that's fundamentally about benefits compliance. And it isn't that you don't need some sticks, because you do, but we've got to move the balance between sticks and carrots to be in a better place than it is at the moment. So those are the three things. And then I guess the fourth thing that needs to happen is that there's a multitude of organizations, as you say. It's a real spaghetti soup of organizations. We found 70 in Barnsley alone that were in some way helping people who are economically inactive. So heaven knows for the poor individual how they navigate that. How do employers navigate that massive support? So all of that needs to be streamlined. All of that needs to be coordinated and aligned so that individuals have an easy way into the system. And that's where the system steward, making sure that all of these organizations come together around the needs of an individual. No one has responsibility for doing that at the moment. And we suggest ways in Barnsley that that could be done as a pilot. And then the final piece of the action is public policy at a national level. And this is really about what the government, I hope, will do in its white paper shortly to be published around work and economic inactivity. There are some profound changes in public policy that need to happen at a national level about the way that the benefit system works, the way that employers are engaged, etc. So, there are some good local solutions that we can test over these next few years, and they have to be underpinned by a big national drive. If the government is going to hit its objective, which is to have higher levels of economic growth and more inclusive growth, then that will require local and national action.
Absolutely. Actually, back in June, I interviewed Andy Burnham and I asked him what more devolution did he want, and he actually said he wanted devolution of employment services, and I was really surprised. I was thinking that's never going to happen, but I think it's basically because, Alan, what you're talking about is you need those big structures and cultures within DWP, NHS to actually be able to work at that local and regional mayoral authority level.
Okay.
Um, because I mean, obviously, capacity is an issue, but also flexibility. That a lot of these organisations aren't well known for their flexibility, often because their capacity is pushed. So it really needs quite a big change at that national level, as well as that knitting together at the local level.
Absolutely. In fact, I saw Andy a couple of weeks ago in Manchester to discuss exactly this about how that could work in practice. Look, the most alarming thing in one sense is that only 1 in 6 employers say that they would use job centres for their recruitment needs, which tells you a story. And that's because the job centres are really not aligned to local labour markets and the needs of local employers, never mind local people who are unemployed, seeking either actively seeking work or, in the case of the economically inactive, deemed to be not interested in work, which is just a stupendous public policy failure, to be honest. So we've got to change all of that. We've got to get employers engaged, and that can really only happen at a local level. Interestingly, when we launched the Commission report back in July, Liz Kendall, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, very kindly came up to Barnsley and launched the report with me. And that day, I was able to announce that a number of local employers had agreed that they would find 200 jobs for people who are economically inactive. And that's a consequence of the engagement that we've had with them over these last, few years, working with them so they're aware of the problem. And frankly, it's in their interest to do that because so many of them now are short of labour. So they've got to find workers from somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
so
I,
it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge for employees. It's a big challenge for government. It's a big challenge. It will be a big challenge for local authorities and mayors. But right now, the system is a really broken and dysfunctional one, and we won't get to where we need to unless we do some fundamental and radical transformation. It's
yeah.
not working for employers. It's not working for the labour market. It's not working for those people who are out of the labour market who'd like to be back in it in sustainable employment. And it's definitely not working for the taxpayer because the consequence is the welfare bill just keeps rising, rising, rising to an unsustainable level. So we've got to turn all of this on its head.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned employers because I'm reminded that, well, one at the moment, if you're a job seeker, DWP says that any job is a good job, but we know that from a health point of view, that good jobs are good for your health and bad jobs are bad for your health. And so actually we need employers to really be part of the partnership and making this work to understand that bringing people back, and it says it in the commission report, that flexibility, part-time work, potentially working from home, online work, understanding that different people coming back for the first time who have had challenges and probably are still have challenges need to have good work. I mean, obviously, we're a digital inclusion charity, Alan, so I want to talk about digital inclusion. That there wasn't a lot in the Commission report about digital inclusion, but I suppose I felt that was because it underpins everything that we need to do here. It underpins improving health, improving skills, helping people out of poverty, helping people into work. 92% of all jobs require people to have basic digital skills. And also, you mentioned in the report about people, for example, using mental health apps to help them with depression or other forms of mental illness. So there wasn't a lot in the report, but do you think that digital inclusion could form part of future solutions around? I'm going to now move on from pathways to work and talk about Get Britain Working, because obviously that's the white paper that's coming up.
Yes, I mean, obviously, it's got a big part to play because the future is digital. We know that. And, we can't afford to have, I think the numbers are pretty stark, almost a third of people who are economically inactive, don't have decent digital access at the moment. So that's a huge problem. And, it's rather like saying people don't have access to electricity or gas or water. It's just a vital utility nowadays. And you've got a whole bunch of people, as you know better than anyone, are excluded as a consequence. And that is going to get worse, not better, unless we're very, very careful. So absolutely, all of that has got to be underpinned by making sure that there is fair and equal digital access, because otherwise the opportunities that are going to be available to people are going to be unevenly distributed. And frankly, we've got enough of that in our society. We don't want the gap getting wider, we want it getting narrower. And this is why actually, I'm relatively positive and optimistic about the government's agenda, because at its heart, I think what they're trying to do is to create a more inclusive economy, growth economy, but one that is a form of inclusive growth. And digital has got an absolutely vital part to play in all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, that there's a lot of really good messages coming from the government, and it's in the budget that public services are going to get better through the use of technology. But that's not about leaving people behind. That's about improving public services and then bringing people to those online public services and helping them getting the access that they need, the connectivity, the devices, the skills that they need to be able to not just use public services, obviously, but take part in a digital society. So I'm really looking forward to pushing that forward. I mean, joined up thinking and getting out of silos is actually something. I mean, you've been a politician for a while, and I've been knocking around with politicians and policymakers for quite a while. And obviously, it always comes up. But I think that's why I was so excited about Pathways to Work and about the missions from Labour as well, is that we really need to see challenges in that holistic way and people in a holistic way. Um, do you think that I don't know if you know much, I mean, obviously you said Liz Kendall came to the launch of the Commission report, but about Get Britain Working white paper. So I guess I'm putting some of my hope behind that. Do you see that I should be hopeful about Get Britain
Yeah,
Working?
I think so. Look, I mean, there's a very big job that Liz has to do, of transforming the department. I mean, when she came up, she rather clearly said that the Department for Work and Pensions has got to become a department for work. At the moment, it's a department for pensions and benefit compliance. I mean, that's the truth of it. And of course, pensions remains extremely important with an aging population. But we've got to make it into a department for work where it's all about how do you create meaningful job opportunities for people with hopefully good work rather than not good work. How do we get these 2.8 million or as many of them as possible back into the labour market? Because without that, we're not going to create the levels of economic growth in the country. The engine room of growth in the end is the labour market. And you've got a constrained labour market at the moment. And so that has really got to change. So I think, yes, I think the white paper will be the first installment, is the way that I view it. I'm sure that they're going to want to try to pilot some schemes, some initiatives in different parts of the country. And that's good because local labour markets are very different. You mentioned Andy in Manchester. It's just got a very different local labour market because of the nature of the economy in Manchester compared to a Barnsley, and what we can't do is just treat all these the same. So I think there's going to be some, I hope, interesting new initiatives, projects, and so on and so forth, and some bigger, broader public policy changes that will be enacted. But you're absolutely right. This is not just Liz's or the Department for Work and Pension
Yeah.
Department responsibility. It's got to be part of this mission-based approach, which views these big public policy challenges more as horizontal challenges than vertical ones. Government basically works reasonably well in vertical silos. You're in a silo, you pull a lever, sometimes something happens, remarkably enough. Sometimes not what you expect, but it happens. But where government is less effective, to be honest, is where there's a horizontal challenge. So, horizontal challenge would be, how do we transition to the new net zero economy? How do we improve health rather than just thinking about improving healthcare? Because that's about clean air, decent jobs, less poverty, and economic inactivity is this as well. And I guess the final reason for optimism is not just that Keir's government has got this mission-based approach at its heart, but decisions in government often revolve around whether the Treasury has skin in the game. Okay. The Treasury really has skin in the game in this one, because the number one objective for the Treasury is a higher level, and in fact, the highest level of economic growth in the G7 amongst the developed nations. That's the ambition that Rachel, as the Chancellor, has set out. To achieve that, she has to generate a higher employment participation rate. And to do that, she has to reduce the level of economic inactivity. So Treasury have got skin in the game, and that's good. So this
Absolutely.
is not just the responsibility of one department, it has to be the responsibility of the whole government.
Yeah. And the number that I jumped out at me from the Commission report was actually from the Institute of Learning and Work. So if we just shift from 78% economically active to 80% economically active, that would bring 23 billion a year into the economy. So
Exactly.
that and that's as you were saying earlier, both the reduction in the benefits bill, but also those employers be able to find the staff and hopefully skilled people who can then come in and do the jobs that they so desperately need in order for them to grow. So it's really a double whammy. I know from the work that you've done in the past with the Social Mobility Commission and other things that you're also wanting those individuals to have better lives. But if we can improve economic growth at the same time, that has to be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think you talked about this earlier that it's really important that in particular there are clearer signals to people who've been out of the labour market for a while that the nature of the work that they're going into is sustainable and is decent quality. And so there's a responsibility on employers as well here. And one of the recommendations that we make is that, there should be almost a government kite marked good employer charter, which identifies those employers who do offer what I'd call flexi security, so flexible work with security of work. And public policy's got a part to play in that as well. So one of our recommendations in the Commission's report is that for people who are thinking of going back into work, very often one of the hurdles and one of the barriers of concern is, I go back in, it doesn't quite work. I then go back onto benefit. Oh, I started a lower rate of benefit than I was on. Why do I want to take the risk? And so we say, give people 12 months grace that if it doesn't work out, and it mightn't, that they go back to where they were rather than having to start again. So it's this combination of what employers can do as well as what the state and public policy can do that can make a really big difference here, I think.
It's very exciting. I hope it all works. So finally, Alan, I normally ask my guests what would they do if they were Prime Minister? But in this instance, I'm going to ask you possibly an unfair question because it's about digital exclusion. So if you could eradicate digital exclusion in the next decade, what would be some of your priorities?
It's very simple. You'd eradicate poverty. And in particular, you'd eradicate child poverty in this country. Because in the end, digital exclusion is an expression of something even bigger, which is social and economic exclusion. And that's because the gap between the haves and the have-nots is too wide. And we've got to provide more opportunities for people to fulfill their aspirations to progress. And that requires approaches that are about narrowing that gap and making sure that no child in our country, we're a wealthy country, no child should really be growing up in poverty. And so, that's a big thing. It's not a small thing. That's not a narrow public policy instrument. That requires a lot of different types of approaches. But in the end, we won't get to the eradication of digital exclusion unless we get to more prosperity and less poverty being more being dealt with.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So thank you so much for your time today and good luck with all of your work going forward. And I hope that our paths will cross again because I'm sure there's lots of things we could do together.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you very much indeed. And good luck with all the good things that you're doing as well with the foundation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.